You ever had that feeling, that nagging chill down your spine like someone's watching you, even when you're all alone? Yeah, I used to think that was just in my head too, until I spent that weekend in the old house by the lake. It was supposed to be a getaway, just me, Matt, Sarah, and Jenna. We'd been friends since college, always looking for new adventures, and that house, it seemed perfect. Isolated, quiet, surrounded by trees, and of course, the lake. There's something about the water, you know? It's so peaceful, but when the sun goes down, it turns into this endless, black abyss. You can't see anything beneath the surface, and it makes you wonder, what's really out there? The house had been abandoned for years. No one really knew why, but there were rumors. Old, scary stories the locals told about the man who built the house and how he disappeared one night without a trace. Some said he drowned in the lake, others believed he was murdered, but no one really knew. We thought it was just small-town gossip, nothing to worry about. When we arrived, the first thing that hit me was the silence. No birds, no wind, just stillness. Even the trees seemed frozen, as if they were holding their breath. Matt, always the brave one, laughed it off. "Come on, guys. It's just a creepy old house. We'll make it fun." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. You know how some places just feel wrong, like the walls are soaked with old memories? That's what it felt like the moment we stepped inside. The house was bigger than I expected, with creaky wooden floors, thick layers of dust, and windows covered in grime. Everything was left as if someone had walked out and never returned. The furniture was still there, old and worn, and the smell, it was musty, like wet earth mixed with something rotting. Jenna wrinkled her nose. "It smells like something died in here," she joked, but I wasn't laughing. We settled in quickly, throwing our bags in the dusty rooms and gathering in the living room to start a fire. By then, the sun was setting and the shadows outside stretched across the lake like long black fingers. I couldn't stop staring at it, the way the water seemed to ripple, even though there was no wind. It was hypnotic. That's when Matt suggested we explore the house. I wasn't keen on the idea, but you know how it is. Peer pressure. The four of us grabbed some flashlights and started wandering through the rooms. The deeper we went, the more unsettling it became. The walls were covered in old, faded wallpaper, peeling away in long strips. And there were these weird symbols carved into the wooden beams. Not something you'd notice at first glance, but once you did, you couldn't stop looking at them. Sarah found a door to the basement, and Matt, of course, insisted we go down. The stairs were narrow and steep, leading into this damp, dark space that smelled even worse than upstairs. Our flashlights barely cut through the blackness, but we saw enough to know something wasn't right. There were shelves lined with old jars, and I swear, some of them had things inside, like pieces of animals, or worse. Jenna gagged when she saw one that looked like it held a human hand, though Matt said it was probably just some prank from the last people who lived there. But I wasn't so sure. Then Sarah found it, a door in the back of the basement, hidden behind a stack of old crates. It wasn't locked, just wedged shut with an old piece of wood. When Matt forced it open, the smell hit us like a wave, rotten, decayed, like something had been trapped inside for years. Sarah gagged and covered her mouth, but Matt just shone his flashlight inside. Holy, you guys need to see this. Inside there was a small room, bare walls, a dirt floor, and in the middle, a well, an old stone well. The kind you see in horror movies. No rope, no bucket, just a dark, gaping hole in the ground. The air felt thick down there, and it got colder, like the temperature dropped the closer we got to it. Matt, being Matt, peered over the edge. "It's just a well, guys. Probably dry." He picked up a rock and dropped it in. We waited, but we never heard it hit the bottom. Suddenly, Sarah let out a scream. We all spun around, our flashlights cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Nothing we could see, anyway. "Something touched me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I swear, something just grabbed my arm." Matt laughed it off, but I could see the fear in his eyes. We all felt it. Something was wrong. We didn't stay in that basement much longer. Matt sealed the door again, and we rushed back upstairs, trying to shake off the chill. But that night, that's when the real horror began. That night was colder than I expected for early autumn. We all sat around the fireplace, trying to shake off the weirdness of what we'd found in the basement. The mood was different now. No more joking, no more teasing. Even Matt, who usually kept the energy light, was unusually quiet. Jenna broke the silence first. That well, something about it wasn't right. It felt like it was waiting for us. I didn't say anything, but I knew exactly what she meant. I'd had that same feeling, like we'd disturbed something that had been forgotten for a long time. But Matt, always the skeptic, just shrugged. "Come on, guys. It's an old house. Creepy stuff comes with the territory. Let's just enjoy the weekend, all right?" He stood up and grabbed a few beers from the cooler, tossing one to each of us. But even as he tried to lighten the mood, I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye, just outside the window, where the trees met the edge of the lake. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw movement, like a figure slipping between the trees. But when I turned to look directly, it was gone. I didn't mention it. No point freaking everyone out even more. But deep down, I knew we weren't alone out there. We went to bed early, the tension still hanging in the air. The rooms were musty, the kind of old damp that made the sheets feel cold and uncomfortable. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring up at the ceiling, trying to ignore the strange creaks and groans the house made. Every now and then I'd hear something from outside, like a branch snapping or the rustle of leaves. But when I peeked through the window, it was just darkness. Then, the whispering started. At first I thought it was just the wind, a soft, low sound, almost like it was coming from the lake. But as I strained to listen, it became clearer. It wasn't the wind. It was voices, faint, like they were far away, but getting closer. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding. I wasn't imagining it. There were whispers outside my window. I got up slowly, moving as quietly as I could, and crept to the window. The glass was fogged up from the cold, but I wiped it with my hand, just enough to see outside. And that's when I saw them. Figures, standing at the edge of the lake, pale, almost translucent in the moonlight, like they weren't human. There were at least 3 of them, standing perfectly still, staring at the house. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to wake the others, but I was frozen. All I could do was watch as the figures started moving, slowly, like they were gliding across the ground. They were coming toward the house. I ran into the hallway, my heart racing. "Matt! Jenna! Sarah!" I banged on their doors, panic rising in my voice. "You need to wake up, now!" Matt was the first to open his door, rubbing his eyes in confusion. "Dude, what the hell? It's the middle of the night." "There's something outside," I stammered. "At the lake. They're coming toward the house." Jenna and Sarah joined us in the hallway, both looking groggy and confused. "What are you talking about?" Jenna asked, her voice shaky. Before I could answer, there was a sound, a loud, heavy thud from downstairs. We all froze. Another thud, like something or someone was trying to break in. Matt grabbed a flashlight and motioned for us to follow him. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "Let's check it out." We crept down the stairs, the house eerily quiet except for the steady thumping coming from the front door. It was slow, deliberate, like someone was pounding on the wood with their fists. But when we reached the door and Matt flung it open, there was nothing there, just the cold night air and the dark, empty forest. "I swear, I heard something," Matt muttered, shining his flashlight across the porch. But there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no movement, nothing. We were about to head back inside when Sarah gasped, pointing toward the lake. "Look, there!" We all turned to where she was pointing, and my stomach dropped. The figures were gone, but the water. The lake was rippling, and not just a little. It was like something was moving beneath the surface, stirring up the water, making it churn and splash. Something big. "I don't like this," Jenna whispered, her voice trembling. "We should leave, now." Matt hesitated. "Come on, it's probably just fish or something. Don't let this place get to your heads." But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was scared, even if he didn't want to admit it. We all headed back inside, locking the doors behind us. No one said a word as we gathered our things and huddled together in the living room. And then, just as we started to think maybe it was all in our heads, Sarah whispered, What's that on the wall?" We all turned to look, and my blood ran cold. The symbols, the strange carvings we'd seen earlier in the house, they were glowing, faint but unmistakable. A sickly greenish light pulsed from the walls, as if the house itself was coming alive. The glowing symbols on the walls flickered, pulsing like they had a heartbeat of their own. I could feel my chest tighten, fear gripping me like a vice. No one said a word. We just stood there, frozen, staring at the eerie light. It was as if the house was trying to communicate with us, or warn us. Jenna finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. What does it mean? What are those things?" Matt swallowed hard, trying to keep his cool, but even he looked shaken. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not good." Sarah stepped back. "We're not going to make it if we stay down here," Matt yelled over the growing noise, his face pale with fear. "We need another way out." Jenna pointed to a small window near the ceiling, barely large enough for someone to crawl through. "There! We can fit through there!" Without hesitation, we scrambled toward the window, our hearts racing. Matt was the first to climb up, using an old crate as a step. He pushed the window open with a grunt, but just as he started to crawl through, a hand shot up from the well. A hand, pale, bony, and grotesque, with fingers too long and too thin, like the hand of something that had been dead for centuries. It wrapped around Matt's ankle and yanked him back with unnatural strength. He screamed, grabbing onto the edge of the window, kicking wildly as the thing tried to pull him down. "Help me, please!" Matt's voice cracked with desperation as he struggled against the creature. We all rushed to him, grabbing his arms and pulling with all our might. But the hand was relentless, pulling harder, dragging him toward the well. My hands were slipping, the sweat and fear making my grip weak. And just when I thought we'd lose him, Jenna grabbed a broken piece of wood from the ground and drove it into the hand with a scream of fury. The thing let go with a shriek, a sound so piercing it made my ears ring. Matt scrambled through the window, panting, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror. But there was no time to rest. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't done. And the whispers, they were growing louder, angrier. We had to get out of that house. And fast. We didn't stop running until we were halfway down the road, the old house disappearing behind us into the mist. Matt was still trembling, clutching his ankle where the hand had grabbed him. His face was pale, and his breath was shallow. He looked like he was on the verge of passing out. What was that? Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What was in that well? None of us had an answer. I kept glancing back over my shoulder, half expecting to see something chasing after us, but the road was empty. For now. "We need to go to the police," Sarah said, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. "They need to know about this. Maybe they can—" "No," Matt interrupted, his voice shaky but firm. "They won't believe us. They'll think we're insane." "Matt, we just saw something pull you into a well," I said, my heart still pounding. "We need help." He shook his head, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "No, we can't go to the cops. You don't get it. Whatever that thing was, it's not just some ghost or monster. It's ancient. It's like the house itself is alive, and it doesn't want us to leave. Jenna and Sarah exchanged nervous glances, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Matt wasn't one to exaggerate, and the fear in his voice was real. But what could we do? The house was too dangerous, and there was no way we could go back inside. And then, Jenna's phone buzzed. We all jumped, the sudden sound making us flinch. She looked down at her screen, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Who's it from?" I asked, still catching my breath. Jenna's face paled as she held up the phone. It's from inside the house." "What?" Sarah gasped, leaning over to look at the screen. There, in the message, were 4 words that sent a cold wave of dread crashing over us. "Come back. We're waiting." My stomach dropped. The message was from an unknown number, but the address that followed, the old house by the lake, was unmistakable. It was like the house itself had reached out to us, calling us back into its grasp. "We can't go back," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "We barely made it out alive." But Matt shook his head, his expression grim. "We don't have a choice. It's not going to let us go, not until we know the truth." "The truth?" I asked, incredulous. "What truth?" Matt pointed to the house in the distance, barely visible through the trees. "That place. It's not just haunted. It's a trap. Something's buried there. Something that was never meant to be found." I felt a pit open up in my stomach. This was more than just a ghost story. There was something darker, more malevolent at work. The whispers, the hand, the symbols on the walls. It was all connected, and it wanted us back. "Why us?" Sarah whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why is this happening to us?" Matt looked down at the ground, his voice quiet. "Because we were stupid enough to go inside." For a long moment, none of us spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of the lake lapping against the shore. The sky above was darkening, the first hints of twilight creeping in. The air was thick with tension, and every second we stood there felt like the house was watching us, waiting for our next move. Finally, I broke the silence. "If we go back, we go together. We end this. No more running." Matt nodded, his face set with determination. Jenna and Sarah exchanged a nervous glance, but they didn't argue. We all knew there was no other way. Whatever dark force lived in that house wasn't going to let us escape. Not until we faced it head on. With one last deep breath, we started walking back toward the house. The road seemed longer this time, the shadows stretching out around us as the sun dipped lower on the horizon. Every step felt heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the house knew we were coming back and was preparing for us. By the time we reached the front door, the sun had nearly set, casting an eerie glow over the property. The house loomed above us, silent and foreboding, the once familiar structure now looking more like a prison than a place we could ever escape from. Matt stepped forward, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He hesitated for just a moment, then turned it. The door swung open with an unsettling creak, revealing the dark, empty hallway beyond. We stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind us. The whispers began again, faint at first but growing louder with every step we took. They echoed through the walls, wrapping around us like a suffocating fog. This time they weren't just calling our names, they were speaking directly to us. "Welcome back." I shuddered, my heart racing as we walked deeper into the house. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the walls seemed to close in around us. The glowing symbols were still there, pulsing like they were alive, and the floor creaked beneath our feet, like it was ready to swallow us whole. Suddenly, Matt stopped in his tracks. He turned to us, his face pale. "Do you hear that?" We all listened, straining to hear over the whispers. And then I heard it too, a soft, rhythmic thudding, like footsteps, but slower, heavier, like something massive was moving through the house, coming toward us. We turned a corner, and there it was, standing in the middle of the room, barely visible in the dim light, was a figure, tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. It wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its skin too pale, and its mouth, it was stretched into an unnatural grin, and it was staring right at us. "What the hell is that?" Sarah gasped, backing away, and the creature didn't move, but its grin widened, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. It took one step forward, then another, and then it spoke. "Welcome home." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The creature's words hung in the air, sending waves of terror through my body. None of us dared to move, frozen in place as it took another slow, deliberate step toward us. "Run," Matt whispered, his voice barely audible. But my legs wouldn't cooperate. The sheer wrongness of the thing standing before us held me in place, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "Run!" Matt shouted this time, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the door. Jenna and I followed, our feet finally breaking free from the invisible chains that had kept us rooted. We bolted down the hallway, the sound of the creature's heavy footsteps echoing behind us. It was chasing us. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, like the house itself was screaming. The walls seemed to close in, the floor beneath us creaking as if it was going to give way at any moment. I glanced back, my heart pounding in my chest, and saw the creature rounding the corner, its hollow eyes locked onto us. We burst through the front door, not even bothering to close it behind us, and ran for the car. Matt fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly that he dropped them onto the ground. "Come on! Come on!" Jenna screamed, her eyes wide with panic as the creature stepped out onto the porch, watching us with that same horrific grin. Matt finally got the door unlocked, and we scrambled inside. He started the engine, slamming his foot on the gas as the tires screeched against the gravel driveway. The creature took a step forward, then another, as if it was still deciding whether to come after us. And then it stopped. I watched through the rearview mirror as the house faded into the distance, the creature standing motionless at the entrance, its grin never wavering. For a brief moment, I thought we were safe, but then Jenna's phone buzzed again. Another message. "You'll be back. We always come back." We didn't stop driving until we were well beyond the town, heading toward the highway that would take us as far away as possible. No one spoke. The fear and exhaustion had drained us, leaving us numb, barely able to process what had just happened. But as we finally reached the highway, Matt broke the silence. "We need to figure out what it wants." Sarah turned to him, her face pale, eyes wide. "What are you talking about? We barely got out of there alive. You want to go back?" "We can't escape it," he said, his voice flat, resigned. "The house, whatever is in there, it won't let us go, not really. You saw the message." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "We're not going back there, Matt. That thing, whatever it is, it's over. We got out." Matt didn't respond right away. He just stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost too quiet to hear. "It's not over." The weeks that followed were a blur of restless nights and growing paranoia. No matter how far we went, no matter how much we tried to forget, The house lingered in the back of our minds. Every shadow, every whisper of wind made us jump. None of us could shake the feeling that we were being watched. Then, one night, I woke to find another message on my phone. "It's time." It was from the same unknown number, the same ominous message that had started all of this. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, my heart racing. And then came the knock on my door. I opened the door slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Standing there, on my front porch, was Matt. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, just like they'd been the night we left the house. "We need to go back," he said, his voice empty, almost robotic. Behind him, in the shadows, I could see Jenna and Sarah. Their faces were just as blank, their eyes distant, like they were in some kind of trance. "No," I whispered, stepping back. "No, I'm not going back." Matt took a step forward, his expression unchanging. "You don't have a choice. It's already started." My blood ran cold. Before I could react, they stepped inside, closing the door behind them. I backed away. "We have to finish it," Matt said, his voice unnervingly calm. "The house, it's calling us." I wanted to scream, to run, but something deep inside me knew he was right. This wasn't over. It had never been over. The house wouldn't let us go, not until it had what it wanted. The four of us returned to the old house by the lake, the air thick with tension. The moment we stepped inside, the whispers began again. Louder this time, almost overwhelming. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, the floor creaking beneath our feet. We made our way to the well in the basement, where it had all begun. The creature was waiting for us, its hollow eyes glowing in the darkness, its grin wider than ever. "You came back," it said, its voice echoing through the room. "Good. Now, you can stay." Suddenly, the floor gave way beneath us and we fell. I don't remember hitting the ground. All I know is that when I opened my eyes, I was lying on cold, damp earth. The others were beside me, unconscious but alive. We were deep underground, in some kind of chamber, the air thick with the stench of decay. The creature was gone, but the whispers were still there, louder than ever, coming from all around us. "We have to get out of here," Jenna said, her voice trembling as she helped Matt to his feet. "We have to..." But then, the ground began to shake. The walls started to close in, the whispers turning into screams. And then I saw it. In the center of the chamber, buried beneath layers of dirt and stone, was something ancient, something alive, a heart. A massive, pulsing heart, black and rotting, yet still beating with a terrifying rhythm. The house. It wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it was hungry. I don't know how we escaped. I don't remember running, or how we got back to the surface. All I know is that when I finally came to, we were outside, standing at the edge of the lake, watching as the house collapsed in on itself, sinking into the ground. But even as the house disappeared beneath the earth, I could still hear the whispers. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. What do you think? Is the house truly gone? Or is it waiting for its next victims? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more terrifying stories. Also, tell us, where are you watching from?